Before sunrise, the door shuts behind you. The final thing you see is a thin line of gray light vanishing between iron hinges. No bed waits for you, no clean water, no words written on a wall, only stone, straw, cold air, and the breath of other men somewhere in the dark. You have no idea what day it is. You aren't certain who is holding you here. All you know is that an hour ago, you were free, and now you are not. In the Middle Ages, a prison cell wasn't always a place where people were sent as punishment. Sometimes it was where they were left to be forgotten before anyone decided what to do with them. This is the tale of an ordinary man in the year 1200 who entered a castle through a side door and did not walk back out for a very, very long time. This is what life inside a medieval prison was truly like. Not the legend. Not the myth. The brutal, quiet, patient truth. When most people today hear the word dungeon, they all picture the same thing: deep underground, iron chains hanging from the walls, a hooded man holding a torch, screams echoing through tunnels carved from black rock. That image isn't history. It's theater. The real medieval prison was stranger, and in many ways, worse. Not every medieval prison was underground, many were not. Prisoners were kept inside towers, inside gatehouses, inside castle basements, in locked rooms above stables, in fortified town buildings, in monasteries, and in small city jails attached to the local court. A medieval cell might be a damp chamber beneath a tower, but it could just as easily be an upper room with a single window, a heavy door, and a guard posted outside. And prison itself wasn't always the punishment. In our modern world, when someone is found guilty, the sentence is usually time, months, years, decades. The prison is the punishment. In the Middle Ages, that idea barely existed. A medieval prison was, more often than not, a waiting room. A man was held there before his trial, before a ransom was paid, before a debt was settled, before the lord of the castle decided his fate, before the bishop arrived, before the king answered a letter, before the family found money, before someone, somewhere, remembered him. The prison was not always the punishment. Sometimes it was the waiting room before punishment, ransom, trial, or death. And that is where the real horror began. Not in the chains. Not in the torture. But in the silence of not knowing how long the waiting would last. To understand the medieval prison, you first have to grasp how an ordinary person ended up inside one. In the Middle Ages, you didn't need to commit a great crime to be locked away. You only needed to be unlucky. A peasant could be accused of stealing food during a hard winter: bread, grain, a chicken, a piece of cured meat. The accusation alone was sometimes enough to be dragged into a cell while the Lord decided what to do. A man could be locked away for failing to pay a debt, not because he refused, but because the harvest had failed, or the Lord had raised the rent, or his tools had broken, or his cow had died. He owed money he couldn't pay, so his body became the payment. A soldier could be captured in battle and held for months while his family or his lord tried to ransom him back. A traveler could be arrested simply for looking suspicious in the wrong town. A servant could be locked up because his master accused him of theft, and his master's word counted more than his. A nobleman could be held because he had backed the wrong side in a war. A knight could be held because he had insulted the wrong family. A merchant could be held because a city official wanted his goods. A monk could be held because he had spoken against the bishop. And here is something most people don't realize: in the Middle Ages, even captivity had a social class. A wealthy prisoner and a poor prisoner could be locked inside the same castle on the same day, by the same lord, for crimes that sometimes weren't so different, and yet they would live two completely different lives behind those walls. The nobleman might be given a private chamber with a bed, a table, a candle, and meals brought up from the castle kitchen. He might be allowed to write letters. He might receive visitors. He might keep his servant with him. He might walk in a small courtyard once a day. His captivity was uncomfortable, sometimes humiliating, but rarely deadly. The poor man, locked in the same building, lived another life entirely. He shared a cold cell with strangers. He slept on old straw. He ate whatever was given, if anything was given. He had no candle, no letters, no visitors he could pay for, and no servant to bring him news. For him, the prison was not a delay, it was a slow erasure. In the Middle Ages, even captivity had a social class, and which class you belonged to often decided whether you walked out of the castle alive. Now, follow him. A man around 30 years old, accused of a crime he may or may not have committed. His hands are bound in front of him with thick rope. His shoes are gone. His tunic is torn at the shoulder where a guard pulled him from his home before sunrise. He is being walked toward a castle he has seen all his life from a distance but never entered. He does not go in through a grand hall. He is taken through a side passage, past servants, guards, dogs, barrels, tools, and locked doors. The castle is not silent, it is alive. People are cooking, working, shouting, carrying wood, fixing weapons, washing linen, leading horses, and somewhere beneath or behind all of this life, there is a room where men wait in darkness. This is one of the strangest truths about a medieval prison. It was not a place far from civilization, it was built directly into the heart of it. Above the prisoner's head, the Lord might be eating roasted meat. In the next courtyard, a wedding might be celebrated. In the chapel nearby, a priest might be praying for the souls of the household. Children might be playing on the steps of the great tower. And just a few walls away, a man sat on cold stone not knowing the date. He is taken down a narrow staircase. The walls grow closer. The air grows heavier. The temperature drops. The smell changes. Up above, the air smelled of smoke, animals, bread, sweat, leather. Down here, it smells of stone, damp wood, old straw, and something else he cannot name, something that has soaked into the walls over the years. A guard stops in front of a heavy door. He does not speak to the prisoner. He does not look at him. He has done this many times. To him, this is not a dramatic moment, it is work. He turns a key the size of his hand, and the door opens. Inside, there are already others. He cannot see them clearly at first. His eyes haven't adjusted to the dark. He sees only shapes against the walls. 2 men, maybe 3. One of them coughs. One of them does not move at all. The guard pushes him gently forward, not cruelly, almost without thinking. The door closes. The key turns. The footsteps walk away. And just like that, the man becomes part of the castle's quiet inventory. For a long moment, he does not move. He listens. He learns the sound of the room, the drip of water somewhere, the breathing of the others, the faint wind in the hallway outside, the small creaks of old wood and stone that never stop in a castle. By the second night, he will know all of these sounds by heart. And he will start to invent meanings for them. Most people imagine a medieval cell as a long dramatic chamber, stone arches, iron racks, skeletons in the corners, burning torches on every wall. The reality was smaller, quieter, much more boring, and in many ways much harder to live with. A typical cell inside a castle was a single small room, sometimes only large enough for a man to lie down with his arms stretched out. The walls were rough stone. The floor was packed earth or stone covered with thin old straw that was almost never changed. There was usually one door made of thick oak reinforced with iron bands. Sometimes there was a small slot at the bottom or in the middle just wide enough to push a wooden bowl through. That slot was the prisoner's only daily contact with the outside world. Some cells had a small window high on the wall with iron bars. It was rarely large enough to climb through, but it allowed a thin column of cold air to enter and a thin column of weak light to fall on the floor for a few hours each day. Other cells had no window at all. Those were the worst. A man could lose track of day and night within a single week. The cell offered almost nothing: a pile of straw to sleep on, a wooden bucket for waste, a clay jug for water if the guard had been generous. Sometimes a single rough blanket, often shared between 2 or 3 men. Nothing that belonged to him, nothing he had chosen. He could not change the temperature. He could not open the door. He could not control the light. He could not decide when to eat. He could not decide when to sleep. He could not decide when to be alone or when to be with strangers. In the Middle Ages, the deepest pain of being locked up was not pain at all. It was the slow, complete loss of small daily choices. The worst part was not one single moment. It was the slow repetition of everything. The same wall, the same cold, the same waiting, the same footsteps outside the door, the same dripping somewhere in the stone, the same faint smell that he could no longer separate from his own body. Days began to look identical. Then weeks. Then he stopped counting weeks. Some prisoners tried to fight against this. They scratched marks into the wall, one for each day they thought had passed. They prayed at the same time every morning. They counted the meals. They counted their own breaths. But the most honest survivors learned sooner or later the truth about the medieval cell: you could not control the time. You could only learn to live inside it. The cell was not designed to break a man with violence. It was designed, often by accident, to break him with sameness. People always ask the same question when they think about a medieval prison: what did the prisoners eat? The answer is not simple. Because in the Middle Ages, what a prisoner ate depended on 3 things: where he was, who held him, and how much money was attached to his name. For the poorest prisoner, food was usually simple, repetitive, and barely enough. He might receive a piece of dark bread once a day, sometimes twice. The bread was often hard, sometimes a few days old, made from rough grain. With it, he might get a thin porridge made from oats or barley boiled in water, sometimes with a little salt. If the Lord was generous or if it was a feast day, there might be a small piece of cheese or a strip of dried fish. The drink was rarely water alone. Water in medieval towns and castles was often unsafe to drink directly. Prisoners were more often given weak ale or watered-down beer because it was safer and lasted longer in storage. The wealthy prisoner ate something completely different. He could pay for his own food brought up from the castle kitchen or even sent in by his family: roasted meat, white bread, wine, cheese, fruit when it was in season, sometimes a hot meal twice a day. In some castles, a noble prisoner ate better than the guards who watched him. He paid for his comfort with coins, with jewelry, with promises of future favors, or with letters guaranteed by his family back home. For the men in the middle, the ordinary men, food was a daily problem solved by family. If he had relatives in the town or village, they might come to the castle gate with bread, cheese, salted pork, or beer. The guard would inspect it. He would often take a portion for himself. Whatever remained would be passed through the slot in the door. A wife, a mother, a brother, or a child walking up to the castle gate with a small basket was, for many medieval prisoners, the only thing standing between them and slow starvation. This is one of the most important and most uncomfortable truths about medieval imprisonment. Inside the cell, almost everything had a price. A prisoner could often pay for better food. He could pay for fresh straw. He could pay for lighter chains if he was chained at all. He could pay to be moved to a slightly better cell. He could pay to have a candle for a few hours in the evening. He could pay for a guard to carry a message to his family. He could pay for a priest to visit him. A poor prisoner did not only fear the guard, he feared being too poor to survive captivity. This is why so many medieval prisoners died not from violence, not from torture, not from execution, but from sickness, cold, and hunger that arrived slowly, one quiet day at a time. The cell did not need to kill quickly. Time and poverty did most of the work for it. By the second week, something inside him begins to shift. It is not pain. It is not fear in the sharp sense. It is something deeper, a slow, quiet realization that he has lost his grip on time itself. In a medieval cell, time did not pass by the clock. It passed by footsteps, keys, meals, prayers, and rumors. He still tries to track the days. He listens for the bells of the castle chapel. He listens for the changing of the guard. He listens for the morning sounds in the courtyard above. But after a few weeks, the bells start to blur together. The guards rotate at uneven hours. The courtyard sounds change with the seasons. He thinks it is March. It might be April. It might already be May. In a world without clocks, without calendars on the wall, without sunlight to anchor him, time becomes a fog he walks through alone. Every day has the same shape. He wakes when his body decides. He sits. He waits. He listens. Footsteps in the hallway become the most important sound in his life. When he hears them, his heart moves before his mind does. Are they coming for him? Are they bringing food? Are they bringing news? Are they bringing a priest? Are they bringing pain? Are they bringing release? When the footsteps walk past his door without stopping, he feels two things at the same time, relief and disappointment. Many prisoners turn to prayer, not because they suddenly became more religious, but because prayer was one of the few things they could still control. He could choose when to pray. He could choose how long. He could choose which words. In a place where every other choice had been taken from him, prayer became a small private kingdom of will. Some prisoners spoke to saints by name, asking for protection, for patience, for a quick judgment. Others made silent promises: if I survive this, I will give my best cow to the church. If I survive this, I will never lie again. If I survive this, I will walk on foot to a holy place far away. In a medieval cell, faith was not always pure. It was often a quiet bargain with anything that might be listening. The hardest part was not the cold, or the hunger, or even the fear of pain. The hardest part was the imagination. Alone in the dark, the mind does not stay quiet. It builds entire worlds. He imagines his trial in detail. He imagines his death in the public square. He imagines his return home. He imagines his family forgetting him. He imagines his wife marrying another man. He imagines his children growing up without his face. He imagines all of these things again and again because there is nothing else to do. In a medieval cell, the worst torture was rarely caused by another human being. It was caused, day after day, by the prisoner's own mind. Now we have to talk about the men who held the keys. In films and stories, the medieval jailer is almost always the same character: a huge brute, a cruel man, a monster smiling in the shadows. The truth was more complicated and more human. Most medieval guards were not professional torturers. They were ordinary men, often poor, often badly paid, often local. Many were former soldiers, former servants, or sons of older guards who had passed the job down. For most of them, watching prisoners was simply work: long hours, low wages, cold hallways, boring routines. They were not there to make anyone suffer. They were there to keep men inside walls. Some were kind in small, quiet ways. They might pass an extra piece of bread. They might allow a prisoner to speak with another for a few minutes. They might carry a message to a family member without asking for too much in return. Others were cruel, sometimes openly, sometimes in small ways that built up over weeks. They forgot meals. They ignored requests for water. They mocked prisoners who cried at night. They took bribes and then did nothing in return. And some were simply cold, which, inside a medieval cell, could be just as dangerous as cruelty. The most important truth about medieval guards was this: inside the prison, they had small but very real power. And small power in a closed system can be sold. A guard could be bribed to bring better food. A guard could be bribed to deliver a letter. A guard could be bribed to allow a visit. A guard could be bribed to pretend not to notice when a prisoner was given a blanket, a candle, or a piece of fruit. A guard could even be bribed to look the other way for a few crucial seconds. In some recorded medieval cases, prisoners escaped not because of brilliant plans, but because the right amount of silver had reached the right pair of hands. This is where the medieval prison system became something deeper than just walls and locks. It became a business. Around each prisoner, an invisible network grew, a family on the outside paying messengers, paying guards, paying clerks, paying priests, a lord above calculating how much the prisoner was worth, alive or dead, a bishop somewhere deciding whether to involve the church, a merchant nearby ready to lend money at high interest to families desperate to free a brother or a son. The medieval cell was not just a hole in the ground. It was a quiet business. For the prisoner inside, none of this was visible. He saw only the same face arriving with the same bowl. He heard only the same key in the same lock. He understood only that this single man, with his small ring of iron, could decide whether his day was bearable or unbearable. The men with the keys did not need to own the castle. Inside the prison, he owned the day. To really understand the medieval prison, you have to imagine two prisoners in the same castle on the same night. The first is a captured nobleman. He is held because he supported the wrong side in a war between two great families. His captor knows exactly what he is worth. A ransom has already been demanded, and his relatives are gathering the money. While they negotiate, he lives in a private upper chamber. He has a real bed. He has a small writing table. He has candles. He has wine. He has clean clothes brought to him each week. He receives news from the outside, sometimes through letters, sometimes through visiting relatives. He even hears music from the great hall on certain evenings. He is not free. He cannot leave. He cannot ride. He cannot hunt. He cannot lead his men. But he is not, in any real sense, suffering. 3 floors below him, in the lower part of the same castle, 3 other men share a single cell. One was accused of stealing a sheep. One could not pay a debt to a money lender. One was caught traveling without permission through the Lord's land. None of them know each other. None of them have ever met before. And yet now, they sleep within reach of one another every night on the same old straw. They have no candles. They have no books. They have no letters. They have no servants. Their families, far away, do not even know if they are still alive. These 2 worlds existed inside the same walls, on the same night, under the same Lord, in the same year. They breathed the same cold air in different amounts. They listened to the same bells with very different feelings. In the Middle Ages, the prison did not treat all men equally. Almost nothing in the Middle Ages did. A man's name, his blood, his coins, and his connections often mattered more than the truth of what he had done. The same wall could mean discomfort for one prisoner and a slow death for another. Somewhere above him, his fate was being discussed. Maybe in a long hall with the Lord and his advisors. Maybe in a small room with a clerk and a priest. Maybe at a town meeting where his name was read out from a list. Maybe, and this was just as common, his name was not being discussed at all because no one had remembered him for weeks. In the Middle Ages, there was no single, unified system of justice. There was Northwest Central Court that worked the same way in every town. Justice changed from kingdom to kingdom, from city to city, from lord to lord, from bishop to bishop. A man might be judged by his local lord sitting in his hall. He might be judged by a city council in a fortified town. He might be judged by a church court if the accusation involved religion. He might be judged by a royal officer if the case was serious enough to attract the king's attention. And in many places, he might wait months or even years before any of these judgments actually took place. While he waited, news reached him only in small pieces. A guard might mention something. A new prisoner might bring a rumor from outside. A priest might whisper a few words during a brief visit. He might learn that his case had been delayed. He might learn that his accuser had died. He might learn that a powerful neighbor was pleading for his release. He might learn nothing at all for weeks at a time. He learned to live on small pieces of information, the way a starving man learns to live on small pieces of bread. And here is the truth that medieval people understood and that we in our modern world sometimes forget. In the Middle Ages, innocence was not always enough. Sometimes, survival depended on who believed you, who protected you, and who could pay for you. A guilty man with the right friends could walk free. An innocent man with no one to speak for him could die forgotten in the cell. The prison did not care which of the two you were. The prison only cared whether someone, somewhere, still wanted you out. Now we arrive at the brutal truth promised by this story, and it is not what most people expect. The brutality of a medieval prison was not, in most cases, the brutality of constant violence. It was something quieter, deeper, and harder to see. The brutality was the slow loss of everything that made a man feel like himself: his clothes, his name spoken aloud, his face seen by people who knew him, his ability to choose when to eat, when to sleep, when to speak, his sense of which day of the week it was, his memory of his own voice when he had not used it for many days. The brutality was being poor in a system where even survival had a price, where bread, water, light, news, prayer, and human contact were all things that could be sold by a guard to a prisoner who could pay, and denied to a prisoner who could not. The brutal truth is that the medieval prison was not separate from medieval life. It was built into it. Above the prisoner, the castle kept working. Bread was baked, horses were fed, lords gave orders, bells rang, wine was poured, letters were written, children were born, marriages were celebrated, wars were planned. And below, in the dark, someone waited to learn whether his life still belonged to him. That is the real horror of the medieval prison. Not the chains, not the rats, not the shadows, not the blood. It was the ordinariness of it, the way a single human being could disappear inside a building full of life and become, for everyone above the stairs, simply a name on a list. A man who was no longer a neighbor, no longer a husband, no longer a son. Just a body in a room. Just a problem waiting to be solved or forgotten. In the Middle Ages, the worst thing the prison could do to you was not pain. It was the slow proof that the world above could keep turning perfectly well with or without you. One day, at a time he no longer recognizes, he hears footsteps again. They stop in front of his door. They do not move on. They wait. Then a key turns in the lock. He has heard this sound 1,000 times in his imagination. He has played out this moment in his mind in every possible way. Sometimes, it ended in freedom. Sometimes, it ended in a public square in front of a crowd. Sometimes, it ended in another deeper cell. Sometimes, it ended in nothing at all. The door opens. Light enters the cell, and it hurts. Not in the gentle way of a bright morning, but in a sharp, physical way, like a blade against the eyes. He has lived for so long in shadow that real light feels almost like an attack. He stands slowly. His legs are weak. His knees do not remember how to carry him. His back hurts in places he did not know could hurt. His hands shake, not from fear, but from sheer lack of use. When the door opens again, he does not know if it means freedom, judgment, ransom, or something worse. He does not ask. There is no point in asking. He will be told what he needs to know when he needs to know it. That is the final quiet rule of the medieval prison. For days, maybe weeks, maybe months, the prison has taken everything from him except one thing, the hope that someone outside still remembers his name. Whether that hope will be answered by mercy, by justice, by silver, or by death, he does not yet know. But for the first time in a long time, he is moving forward. And in a medieval prison, that simple fact, that small motion of a body walking through an open door, was sometimes the only victory a man would ever be allowed. This was life inside a medieval prison. Not a single dramatic scene. Not a single famous torture. But a long, quiet, uneven, deeply human story repeated thousands of times in thousands of castles across hundreds of years. A story that almost no one wrote down. A story that almost everyone eventually forgot. If you want to see what daily life was really like beyond the prison walls, watch our next reconstruction of life inside a medieval castle. The world above the prisoner was just as strange, just as brutal, and just as fascinating as the world below. Until then, remember this, the Middle Ages were not only built by kings, knights, and cathedrals.